vänta tills han stänger dörren. Eller? Hi and welcome to the session Green Colonialism, Indigenous Youth for a Peaceful and Sustainable Future. In this session, we have gathered Indigenous youth to discuss the effect of green colonialism on their lands and waters. My name is Tilde Renman, and I am a board member of Sami Norra, the Sami youth organization in the Swedish part of Sápmi. And we are the ones arranging this panel with support from Siwi. We want to start by acknowledging that we only have youth from the West world participating in this session. If we had the means and the space, of course, we would have loved to have a youth delegate from every Indigenous community. Moving on, the session will be divided into different themes. These are green colonialism, decolonization, personal story, and Indigenous youth to the water sector. The panelists will present on the different themes, and in the end, we'll have a moment for final thoughts. Before presenting each speaker, we have decided that we want to share a video, which is from Sápmi, but that we all think represents us and our struggles in a visual way. So now we're going to show a trailer for a documentary called Historia, Stitches for Sápmi.
Naturen talar till oss. Men vi har inte lyssnat. Allting är i obalans. Det är någonting som håller på att hända.
Täällä ei ole kuin laskenut. Me koen laskenut. Vastiin, että saan jokkua kantai. Oli soma vaina, oli kunniavasten.
Det föddes en kamp. I den samiska kulturen har vi alltid tvingats kämpa. Mot religiöst förtryck. Mot statens och överhetens övergrepp. Mot intrång i våra marker och i vår kultur. Och nu har vi en ny kamp vi måste föra mot klimatförändringarna. Och klarar vi inte den, då kommer den att bli våran sista.
So this is a visual way for you guys to get a little insight in our thoughts and our struggles. And I would recommend to see the whole movie if you can make the time for it. Or you should make the time for it, actually. So the participants will now present themselves to you, and we can start here and make the round.
Thank you. Okini Sunix and Nagasim, it's Binamaka. Hello everyone, my name is Disa Crochief. I'm from Siksika, which is one of 4 tribes that make up the Blackfoot Confederacy into Canada, and one of our tribes is into the States. The clan that my family comes from is called Saiks, and it means aggressive and fierce clan. Traditionally, we patrolled the borders of our territory. In modern times, today, I take that as advocating for our environment, making sure that youth have a voice in space and are comfortable in spaces like this as well, and have proper representation. I'm here representing the Blackfoot Youth Water Council. I am also the Indigenous Youth Lead for Waterlution, and I'm really happy and thankful to be here.
Danjo, shi Kieran Vicenti Shiji. Hello, everyone. My name is Kieran Vicenti. I'm a water commissioner for the Hickory Apache Nation. And through my water commissioner position, I have attended many meetings along the Colorado River Basin advocating for Indigenous youth inclusion of our voices and our stories, and making sure that the current and future outlook of the Colorado River Basin is sustainable for all life to come. Thank you for having me.
Hello everyone, my name is Anna Edmondson, and I am, as well as Tilde, part of the Sami youth organization Saminora. And I think it's really an honor to have all these youth gathered and everyone in the audience as well. Because when I was here the first year, I think I was the only Indigenous youth delegate. So it's really nice to see it growing for every year. So thank you all for being here.
Hello, my name is Baylet Peters. I'm honored to be here and represent the Ta'anquechan First Nation from Whitehorse, Yukon. And I'm just here to make sure that the land and the water, of course, have a seat at the table with the youth.
Hello, yate. Shaya Jer Namkina Yanishia, Tkodich eat Nishle. Kiss Ani Bashashin, Ye Denet, Kachine Dashade, or Kiss Ani Dashanella. It's Zichijin de Nasha. Hello everyone, my name is Jer Namkina. I am from the Bitterwater clan, and then my dad is Hopi Sun clan. I come from Tuba City, Arizona. That's in the southwestern United States. And I work with Twanjona with the food security, food sovereignty section. So we do a lot with gardens, farming, and helping people gain access to like fresh food, fresh vegetables, and helping them grow their own. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting to hear a little bit about you and to have you here. It's an honor. Thank you. So maybe not everyone knows that much about green colonialism and what it is. So Kieran will now be presenting on the subject, and we can all learn together if we need that.
Hello, everyone. So going throughout life and decision-making meetings, I often hear the phrase, modern problems require modern solutions. And these modern solutions usually include planning that is green, with misleading slogans that boast green and clean, from commodity to energy. And while these solutions like solar, wind, electric cars, carbon credits, and so on seem so promising, they're so withdrawn because there are endless modern solutions saying, yes, these solutions produce less pollution, saying, yes, these are adequate substitutions, and these solutions provide adequate restitution, repayment for damage already caused, making it easy to disregard exploitation of planet, of people, many miles away with no benefit, only detriment to people and to planet. And it's people from the land, Indigenous peoples, who bear the heavy burden from those who occupy the land of the destruction brought to us. And it's an afterthought solution, and it's occupation and destruction, and it's called reparations and colonialism, respectively. From the Congo to Ghana to Hickory to Sweden. And in this here backyard, colonialism is still ongoing. So while the water is still flowing, there's hope. Before you place a stamp of approval on these clean and green projects and opportunities, do some due diligence to the production line and look at it from start to finish, because the exploitation of people and planet is no real solution at all. But collaboration and respect of people and planet is how we continue. And green colonialism is something that is hard to spot sometimes, because it does do a lot of marketing in the mass media, saying like, oh, this is something that is going to do good for your community, or is going to do good for the world in general because it produces less pollution, like wind and solar. But there are many different factors that go into any real solution. And you have to look at the consequences of each, because there's always going to be something that wasn't marketed to you, but is still a real consequence of what happens. Like, I've heard about the wind farms here in Sweden, that it has encroached on the grazing of the reindeer, and that has put a really big, just not very good things in general for the Sami people. And that's just something in this backyard, but it happens across the globe, and it's not right in your backyard if you are urban, because that's where the solution is for. And it's rural areas that are most affected, and Indigenous peoples that are most affected by these solutions or false solutions. And in the Congo, they are mining minerals, and there's a lot of death in that area because of it. And it's exploitation, and it'll continue as long as we say that it's okay to continue on with these solutions, because it's going to be continued to market to us as solutions, but it's not a solution. So, thank you so much for your time, and just as we continue on through these things, go up the production line, meet with other people, and have a discussion about what is really the full picture of something, because just what is marketed to you is not going to always be the real full picture of everything with all the colors and everything. So, thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts and for presenting about green colonialism. It's really interesting to hear. Now we will move on to decolonization, where Disa will be sharing her thoughts.
Fanny, one of our supportive workers, gave us these sketchbooks, but I thought she was trying to give me a Bible. It's not a Bible. So I will be speaking a little bit about decolonization from my perspective. I'm always learning, and I always will learn my entire life. We're not going to get to a destination where we know everything. I feel like that's not the purpose of life, so it's okay to learn as we go, and to figure things out by having conversations and going through trial and error. And that's also an encouragement for our youth to be involved in these spaces and in all of these conversations. The act of decolonization is an extraction from a colony. So the way that I see it as applying to conversations of water and environment and policy making and mentorship is the practice that we have to acknowledge to unlearn. I feel like we come into these spaces and oftentimes ask, like, what should we do and how we should act. And also in the dominant society, it's considered more that you have more worth depending on your title. But if we look at a cultural standpoint, that's not how we view one another and how we should treat one another. And that's a big part of humanizing our work, is when there's Native people that meet each other, we say, who are you and who are your parents and who are you and where do you come from? That human connection is more important than your title, because like I mentioned at the opening, everyone has something to offer. And the way we treat each other and respect and love one another allows for so much growth and solution to be made. And it's okay to be uncomfortable in order to be comfortable and to have necessary heavy conversations in safe spaces, especially as youth when we're learning how to apply all of that to the work that we do. It's also a practice of pausing and listening to our bodies and listening to the environment around us and treating it as what it is, which is a living, breathing entity. It's a being that gives to us and we live with and not own. We're not the center of the universe or the center of the environment. We're a part of that cycle. And that's also a very healing way to think. To remind ourselves and the people we work with to think in a cycle and not linear, not to look what's just in front of us, but to remember the fact that every single person in this room is a future ancestor, to think of the generations after us, and that everything is a story. So when you're thinking of a problem and you're stunted, it's good to remember to bring it full circle. And as well as, I think like we often ask ourselves like the questions of where we should go from here, but also reminding ourselves that everyone has to be at the table. That you can't expect youth to take over positions in leadership without actually having them in those spaces to begin with. With the Blackfoot Youth Water Council, our goal is to encourage a community that is guided by Indigenous ways of knowing. Together, we have the power to innovate and prioritize youth knowledge as the driving force behind sustainable change. And that's a little bit about decolonization from my perspective and the work that I do. I often work with researchers and technicians and have conversations in spaces like this with them where they have the funding and they have the technology and programming, but they're struggling to connect to community and they're struggling to have their projects be sustainable, to like sustain life. But it's kind of something that's more like, it's common to sense as Indigenous people, but a little less to them. And that's the reason why I believe that it's not holding substance, is because they're not bringing the humanness to their projects. They're not bringing in, well, how would this affect the environment, the animals, because everything is connected. From one side of the earth to the other side of the earth, we're very connected. And I find it very beautiful that no matter where you look and speak to an Indigenous person, we have similar ways of thinking and treating each other in the environment. And that's something that is not, like we can't compromise on that. And yeah, that's kind of just a little bit briefly about like how I view decolonization and how that should be brought into focus and acknowledgement into the work that we do.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for exemplifying how you do in your work and such. So, Indigenous people have in many cultures been using oral stories connected to nature, lands, and waters. This is used both as a way to warn, for example, where not to go, and to keep children away from dangers. But it has also been used as a way to pass on knowledge to future generations. This is something that we want to share with you, so you can understand our cultures and our situations a little bit better and get an introduction. So here comes some personal stories from our participants. Would you like to start again, Disa?
So I think a good example would be in 2017, I co-founded a national Indigenous energy summit called 7Gen, and I pitched it in Mexico, and we were able to partner with Student Energy to host it in 2019. It was the first of its kind. I have had the privilege and opportunity to go to many conferences growing up, to see my dad, his name is Robert Crochief, work on land claims regarding water as well. And I always noticed what was lacking in those spaces and like how I felt when I was in those spaces. And I was also able to learn a lot of really good things as well, and I wanted to just bring that to my community, but not just my community. I wanted it to benefit a lot more people, and I was always thinking like it would be really beautiful and amazing to gather with our people and other Indigenous youth to learn from them and encourage each other, because being around us is like being around magic and stars and music. Our ancestors were very balanced and were capable of turning numbers into flowers and seeing the world in a very beautiful and light way. And also how we treat each other as Indigenous people. Like we just always end up gathering in a circle wherever we go. And a lot of us have just met each other at this gathering, but it's like we've known each other for a long time, the way that we interact with each other, and how we bring laughter into the conversation and into these spaces, because laughter is medicine. Because if you notice, like you never want to laugh with someone you don't like. So it's always good to just bring laughter into the space, and just to be comfortable and learn from those people. And so with 7Gen, we were able to focus on the theme of education, engagement, and empowerment, because that has to go both ways. That's a structure that I bring into the work that I do. When you educate, you're teaching them, but also learning, and it's a relationship you're building off of what is important to either of you and how to learn, unlearn, and relearn together. The engagement part is if you're bringing a technology, a program, or a project, you're both working on it together, and breathing life into it together. And then the empowerment is having that continuous relationship, so that if we're working with politicians, if we're working with companies, it's not a Band-Aid fix or like I actually just learned that that's more of like a brand back home. So what do you guys call Band-Aids? It's not what she said. And but it's something that has to be an ongoing relationship, that we stay connected to each other. And that's a story that I like to talk about. And since then, it has grown a lot. It's been a lot more recognized to have Indigenous people's ways of knowing, not just consultation of like one meeting and have that stamp on your project, but to continuously have us in those spaces, because a lot of the technology comes from Indigenous people anyways. A lot of the knowledge, a lot of the research, a lot of the papers that are written, materials that we're taking, all comes from Indigenous people, and we got those from the environment. We got that from Mother Earth, from the water beings, from the sky beings, from the trees, and being able to listen to the original stewards of the land is super important. And decolonization, you don't have to be native to decolonize. It's something that everyone can be a part of. But yeah, thank you.
Would you like to go next, Kieran? Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to what you said last about anybody can decolonize. And I wanted to talk about just like ways to do that. And some of the ways that I've decided to decolonize in what I do is stepping away from academia. And I think that by doing that and taking more part in music and things that I actually enjoy, I can contribute more to my community that way. Because I found that academia is a way to burn yourself out. It's a way to write a bunch of papers and turn them into your professor for them to be the only eyes to see it. And throughout life, and like even from when I was like a kid, I was like, why am I doing this? I'm writing 2 + 2 is 4 for like this year, and then I'm going to be doing like multiplication next year, and all of it is just going to my teacher, and none of it is going towards anything bigger. And it was finally in college when I realized that there are ways to incorporate community in what you learn. And when you learn in community, you really learn, and you don't just learn for yourself and for the teacher to give you a grade. You learn for yourself, and you learn for your family, and you learn for your friends. And you can add humor into it, and you can have fun with it. Not everything is about reading in a textbook and what you get from it. It's about going to the river and being able to dip your feet in the water and feel the rocks and feel the grass and listen to music and have fun. And that's a way of decolonizing, is to just have fun. If it's by going to the river, listening to music, or drawing, or doodling on the side of your homework, any way that you can step away from the norm of like, this is what you have to do to be productive. Productivity isn't the way out of anything. I think that there's a big emphasis on productivity, like this is how you be most productive. So many YouTube videos while I was in college was how to be productive and study for 8 hours, but actually only study for 1 hour, and then just do more homework. And that was never something I wanted to do. I've always wanted to just do something else. And for me, that was music. And I didn't realize that music was something that was so important to me, even though I had done it throughout school and throughout my whole life, just singing and everything, until I met my now fiance, when he showed me that you can do music and it doesn't have to be for anybody else, and you can just have fun and play music, and it can be for your friends, for your family, or it can be for a lot of people. And when you share music and you share art, you build more community and you build more joy in the world, and that's a way of decolonizing. Thank you.
Anna, would you like to go next?
Perfect. Thank you for saying that. And I think it's also really important to have fun to be able to move forward. So my story is based on my childhood and upbringing in Sápmi. I've been taught to look after and respect our nature in the same way as I care for my family. And I'll give you an example. When we go fishing, my aja, my grandfather, points out where to put our fishing nets on the lake. This is not because it's the best place on the lake to fish, but it is our family's place. However, these areas are not draw lines on any map. Their borders long known and respected by generations of Sami as a way to share the gift of nature. Here we only need fish what is needed to fill the bellies of our families and to give to elders who no longer fish for themselves. And this has always been respected. Today, fishing permits are sold by the state of Sweden through the County Admission Board. Because of this, people from anywhere in Sweden or overseas can buy a fishing permit for a week and come over and bring their big boats and their GPS fish finding devices and collect as much fish as possible. These people, they don't respect the borders and they don't respect that you only take the fish you need. During the 20th century, the state-owned company Vattenfall built hydroelectric power plants here. These power plants, they changed the life for the locals. Houses and settlements were moved due to the rising water levels. The fish habitat changed since it was no longer possible to make a living out of fishing. The ice on the lake also became unreliable due to the change of the water levels. And this made reindeer herding difficult as they were forced to change their traditional migratory routes. This led to the people in the area, such as my grandfather, having to work for the government-owned power plant to be able to keep living at the place he called home. And this is still happening today. Another example of the so-called green transition is where expanding industries up north need a huge amount of electricity. To accommodate this, large windmill parks are established, which is cutting through migratory routes for the reindeers and their pasture lands. At the same time, the Swedish government is pushing for more mines to open. This to be able to extract minerals required for batteries and modern technology. Batteries which are needed to store electricity for cars, homes, and industries. We can no longer survive on our traditional way of living. And if we want to stay in our home areas, we're forced to work for the same industries which suffocate our culture. And this is a trauma of our life. The green colonialism is ongoing and is used as a weapon by society to justify the exploitations on our lands and waters. This was my personal story. Thank you.
Welcome up, Billy.
Hello. I just wanted to share a personal story about growing up in Whitehorse, Yukon. Growing up, you always hear stories about the huge king salmon, the Chinook salmon that are on my shawl here. And I unfortunately never grew up seeing them, but my ancestors did. And I just want to represent the salmon and the water that provides the salmon. We are salmon people where I come from, and when we don't have salmon, we lose not only our cultural lands, but we lose our knowledge, and we lose a piece of us. Salmon are a piece of us. We are headwater people, as Colleen James would say, and it's a life source for us, and as well as the water. And when I knew I was coming to World Water Week, I really wanted to represent the salmon because when I was a summer student, I worked on the fisheries and I actually got to see a king salmon for the first time. And I remember it just being the most beautiful moment ever, like seeing this bright red salmon swimming in the water at the head of the creek right before it made its way up to spawn and lay its eggs. And I always think of that moment whenever I think about the water because that moment is just so special to me and I love sharing it with people. And it's sad that even just a generation younger than me, like my little brother, he won't see that and he hasn't seen that. So I think it's important just to have respect for the water because it brings life to everything. Like, bears come down to the creek to eat the salmon, and the salmon, when the bears are finished eating them, they not only decompose in the creek, which brings other life source to other animals and different critters in the creek, but that brings life source back into the water, which we drink and use every day. And we use hydroelectricity in Whitehorse, so we are disrespecting the water that is providing for us. And I think we should just keep that in mind when we talk about the water. Thank you.
Welcome up next, Jaren.
Hello again, everyone. Like I said before, my name's Jaren Namkina, and I come from an area, the Southwest United States, that's very different than here out in Sweden. Here we walked by the river ocean when we came this morning. Back home, we don't have really any rivers, oceans. We have washes that'll run seasonally. And so that's one thing I notice is the way we look at water. Coming from all of these different areas, we look at water differently. So coming from my background, I come from the Black Mesa area, which is kind of been affected a lot by mining. So the mining, they drill down into the aquifer and pump that water up onto the surface to slurry the coal out. So they've kind of disrupted that natural cycle that was already in place and destroyed many of the natural areas and sacred sites. So when we were little, we were used to seeing all of these mines and these giant trucks roaming around because that's what we always knew. But my mother's generation, my grandmas, all of them before, they knew it before that. They would say, oh, this is where your mom was born, but now it's all bulldozed. And so it's interesting to see how in just a few generations it can be disrupted like that. And another thing I'd like to say about myself is that I would like to say that I'm first and foremost a farmer. So where we're from, farming is very important. We grow different varieties of corn, squash, melons, beans, and a lot of this farming is done with very little water. So in the big industrial farms, you notice they pump water up, they bring water from the rivers. We have very little irrigation, so we'll use water from the naturally flowing wash, but we'll irrigate once a year. And then we'll wait for the rains to come. So through farming, I was really able to understand better the connection that we have with water and with our environment. So we irrigate, like I said, once before we plant to get the ground moist. We put our seeds deep in the soil, and the seeds come up, and then that's when the real work begins. Hoeing the weeds every day, praying for rain. Sometimes you may have to haul water. So through mining, taking up the natural water, we're disrupting that groundwater that's underneath. And through the many power plants that we have in our area, it's disrupting the air. So there's kind of a disruption between the earth and the sky. And you can see it now because we're seeing to have to wait longer for the rains to come. So this year, we actually didn't get our first big rain until the Sunday before we came. That's the middle of August. So our plants went without water for May, June, July. So about 3 months, we were out there every day praying for rain, hoping for rain. And that's one thing I've noticed is that, well, here people haven't talked about actually praying for rain, the kind of the spiritual connection that they have for rain. People seem to be talking about water more as like a single resource that we can use, but it's not just that. It's something more than that. And through farming, I was able to see the connections that we have between the groundwater and the water in the sky. There's a connection between that, and we can see that. But now with all of these industries and coal companies, mining companies coming in, it's kind of getting disrupted. And that's what I'm like to share with my personal story, is that farming is what really opened my eyes to see how the world functions, at least in our area. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your stories here with us today. We're so glad we got to hear them. Hopefully, we have some non-Indigenous folks with us here today or online. And one of the things you guys working in the water sector might be wondering is how to include Indigenous youth in your discussions. And this leads us right into the next theme. So I want to welcome our youth to answer the question, if you could say anything at all to the water sector, what would that be? Disa?
I just want to quickly mention too that as I think everyone has mentioned as well, and a common theme, even though we're from different areas, is that water is not just a resource to us. It's not just something we use. It's our relative. It's its own being, and it does a lot of things, and is a lot of things. And I think also just the takeaway is just to listen to the environment around us, and also learning isn't just learning from your schooling, which is important and is a good opportunity and a good accomplishment, but also education can be done through listening to the environment around you, what water you're close by to, or listening to youth, reading a book, listening to a song. All of those things can educate you and improve your way of thinking or help with your way of thinking. And listening to your elders, and if you have the opportunity to speak with elders, it's super important and beneficial. And just remembering to bring humanness into the work you're doing, and taking that pause and bringing that into your decision making is super important. Also, I agree that a lot of our waterways, what we also unfortunately have in common is that none of it is natural anymore. So the waterways that we get our supply from is called the Bow River in Alberta. Our water comes from our mountains, and we're downstream from a lot of towns and from a big city, which is Calgary. And a lot of what existed in nature to have it flow properly and tell the story that it needs to tell isn't natural anymore. And it's more upstream. It's made to make things more convenient for that town and the city itself. And it causes so much problems for us downstream. We're not too big of a fishing community, but we wouldn't be able to eat the fish past the city. And also, in 2013, there was a massive flood that really affected a lot of homes and displaced a lot of families, and also our stock, and that's the result of just not listening to the environment, and also clear cutting a lot of trees, so there's no roots to hold that water in place. So there was just a bigger flood than what we were used to, and in the span of 24 to 48 hours, there was a lot of rain in the mountains. So the snow melt that happens, like, it spread across a few months. It basically, like, had a huge volume of water coming at the same time. And so what happened was all the towns and the dams that are along the way to us, my dad calls them like water chutes. So basically it just filters all the water back into the flow, into the river, and it makes it faster to get downstream in a way, I guess, to us. And so everything that could go wrong during that time frame did go wrong. And instead of flooding their own communities or damaging their dam gates, they chose to open them. And we had less than an hour to react and get our communities that are into the valleys near the water to safety, and a lot of homes were displaced. And that's an example of poor communication and also consideration from everyone that is upstream from us. And I think it's always just easier to disregard Indigenous communities when it comes to the environment and infrastructure and protecting, because we're two different worlds back home, and we are often on like the side burner. For example, even like pipelines that are suggested to go into communities that are not First Nations communities are always like off the table, but it's always pushed onto Indigenous land or sacred land or land that is important and vital to a sustainable and good source of life, which is water and food. It always seems to be those areas that get targeted and disregarded. Canada and America are very young countries. I always say there's furniture and clothing older than our countries. So we're kind of like the first generation to implement different ways of thinking and acting. But that's also why it's super important to have all of us here and to just gather and create community with each other and learn from each other and bring that into decision making and also mentorship. But yeah, that's a little bit about what I'd like to leave everyone with in the story.
Thank you so much. Kieran?
So what I would say to the water sector so my expertise, or where I'm from, has to do a lot with the Colorado River Basin, and we've been having a lot of discussions about the post-2026 guidelines, which will be about how the river will be ruled for the next 20 years, which is a lot of years. And the last time they had rules like this was for the last 20 years, and it started in 2006. But they had to have the interim guidelines be placed in 2007, so you can see how good those worked. And the reason why they didn't work 20 years ago is because there wasn't any flexibility with how the water was supposed to be adjudicated. And it was based off of hydrology from graphs and maps and a bunch of numbers and figures that are supposed to say, this is how the river is gonna flow for the next 20 years, we hope. It'll either be on this low end or on this high end. And if it's anywhere else, we don't know what to do. And that's what happened. The hydrology was unpredictable, and there was no way to account for that. And so the river was not used well. And now that we are coming on to new guidelines that are supposed to be set in place, there's still the same rigidity. There's not much room for flexibility, even though that is what's necessary. So call on the water sector to say that there needs to be flexibility built into the guidelines on how we rule waterways, because there's not one way that we say that things are going to go, it's going to go some other way. It's going to go some other way and some other way. And there's no way to tell what'll happen in the future, what'll happen in the next few hours. And there has to be some sort of way to say that we need to do something different for this ecology. We need to do something different for this area, for this certain hydrology, for everything. And one of the things that goes into that is money. And in the past few meetings that I've had with other tribes in the basin and the upper Colorado River Basin, they've said that the water flows towards money. And that has largely been true, and it will continue to be true so long as we say that that's okay, that that's the status quo, and we'll continue on with that. Because in the lower basin of the Colorado River, there's a lot of money. And the water goes towards making those billionaires richer. And that's how they become richer and richer and richer, and how they can lobby for the guidelines to be placed in their favor. And so if you have any sort of ability to advocate for tribes, include us. Include Native voices and youth voices, because it's not right for the money for the water to flow towards money, because we must all live within our means. And if the means are by money, then only a few will reap the benefits. But most, if not all of us, will not reap any sort of benefits from the water flowing towards money. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Anna?
What I want said are these things. To understand why the inclusion of us Indigenous youth is important, I will first describe how our organisation Saminora works. Saminora has promoted and protected rights and interests of Sami youth for over 60 years. One of our largest events that we are very, very proud of is our annual meeting, where Sami youth come to have fun and connect in a really safe space. Yet, these meetings are not only fun. They also plant seeds of curiosity and knowledge to our members, and the meeting often acts as an eye-opener for the fact that, even if we're young, our voice still has the right to be heard in the current debate. We can see these seeds of curiosity grow, and the next annual meeting, some members might even want to be part of the board. Today, several of our previous members have important positions in society. They become politicians in the Sami Parliament, the EU, or local or regional councils. But they're also the core in our society. They become teachers, policemen, scientists, artists, and so on. It is therefore important to engage youth, as we are the future at the same time as we are reflections of past and present times. And we act as a mirror of what has been and what is to come. People often talk about including youth without knowing how to do so. I feel like us young people, especially as Indigenous youth, are expected to participate in meetings and consultations for free, and that we should be just grateful to be invited. While at the same time, other participants get paid for every hour that they're there by their companies. And even if we're young, we are often expected to have the same knowledge about topics as professionals. And that might scare some of us off to take part in these meetings and in these discussions. So to include youth, we need a regular economic support, easier inclusion in meetings, an open discussion with you guys, and an actual influence in issues that we raise. And you cannot say that you have the support from society without having the support of young people as well. I also want to say that in today's society, land and water are seen as two separate issues. But as Indigenous people, we have been taught to have a holistic view, where land and water are seen as one. It is the same element, since without water, there is no life for us on land. We all work with a holistic, long-term perspective, where a sustainable future is way more important than economic profit. So let us all work together and with respect for our nature and each other to strive for a peaceful and sustainable future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Belit?
Firstly, I just want to say that I know all Indigenous youth want to be heard, and we want to be seen, and we want to have a seat at the table, and we want our voices to be amplified, and we want you to give us a space. And we can't really do that if we're being scared off, like she said, because sometimes it is scary when you go to a meeting and there's lots of big words and different technical terms that you might not know, but we do know what is important to us, and we do know that sustains us and is a life source for us. And I just think it's important that we have things like this for youth to be heard. It's hard to public speak in a space like this, I know, especially for me. But I jumped at the opportunity to be here because I know that it's important for not only my voice to be heard, but for future generations and the present generations and the land and the water to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yaren?
So one of the things I'd like people to remember or to take away is that from our beginning of life, we do come from water. When we're inside of our mother's stomachs, we're in water. So beginning from our life, there's that connection to water. And now when we're born and into this world, there's this type of water that we also have another type of connection with. So it seems that there's kind of been this disruption with all of these different projects that are going on, trying to bring up the groundwater, or trying to change the rivers. So two of the projects that the organization that I work with, that they're helping to fight against are the Black Mesa Pump Storage Project. So this project was planning on bringing fresh groundwater up and using that water to generate electricity, where in the same region, years before, we had the coal mine, which was, like I said before, pumping up water. And that's what we're working against, because this groundwater has already been disturbed. And like I was saying before, there's a connection between the groundwater and the atmospheric water. And by messing with all of that, we're disturbing a lot of these connections, which I think might be one of the reasons why a lot of the rains are coming later and we don't see as much precipitation. And this project would require lots of energy and lots of water, which is something that we don't want in our area, because that would go against what we believe. And another project that they're working against is the hydrogen pipeline, which wants to take hydrogen across the reservation for 300 miles. And this wouldn't be the first pipeline that they built, but they're going through about this through the different areas. And like I said, we're trying to fight against these different things that would use us up all of this water. And one of the things that these projects are just looking at is, like everyone knows, it's just money and how to generate more electricity, because we're not in the same area as we were before when we had the coal-fired power plants and all of these different things. So now they're trying to look for different sources of energy, which they're saying are clean energy, but they're also destroying and degrading the landscape at the same time. So like I said before, water is not just our own resource. There's the animals that use the water, the plants that use the water. And while I'm here, the only time I've heard people talk about the animals and the plants and everything else was here on this panel. It seems we're not thinking about the bigger picture. We're just, people are just trying to see water, how we can get it, how we can use it. But we need to look at the bigger picture and see the animals, the plants, and we need to see our connection to water. And one thing I liked about that trailer is when she came to the river, she addressed it, she talked to it. We have the same idea of water, where we talk to the water, we have prayers for the water, we do offerings for the water. And this has no benefit for big industries, how they can't see this connection that we have with water. And we need to understand that, enabled to understand that we also need to be out on the land. So a lot of the times these companies and places are foreign enterprises. They don't really know this area. Like the Black Mesa Pump Storage, they don't know the area. They don't know the watersheds. Whereas us, we know these areas because we're out on the land. We're working our fields, we're working our farms, we're out herding the sheep. So we know where the water flows. So I think that's one big thing we need to take away too, is in order to understand more about how the water flows and the water moves, we actually need to be on the land observing this and seeing, oh, the water was flowing this high this time last year, but now say it's this low. So what's that connection and what's going on? So I'd just like you guys to take away that we need to really observe more what is happening on our own landscapes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to give them a big round of applause for this. And I really hope that the people working in the water sector and sitting in this audience, whether on site or online, have listened to what they had to say and are taking their thoughts and perspectives with you to apply in your work and really consider this. So now we've come to the part where we're gonna summarize and have some final thoughts from you guys. So if we start right here.
I just want to thank Anna and Tilda for the opportunity to be here. Just to even have a conversation with other Indigenous people is always the best kind of medicine. I'm super proud of the work that you are all doing in your communities, and just being able to gather here and be together in the space with every one of you. I hope that you learn as much as you can here, but also contribute something in a good way, and take something good back home with you as well, and also be able to travel home back to your family safe. And yeah, I'm just really thankful to be here, and thank you for listening and sharing this energy and space with us.
I also want to thank everyone here who has attended and listened, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk about water, and I wanted to say that it is life, and free Congo, free Palestine, free Sudan, and thank you.
I got a couple of thoughts. I liked what I think it was Disa in the start talking about humanizing our work, where we're all on the same level, and we see each other as people together and not in a hierarchy. I also think there's very few people from the water sector here, And I want you to bring with you the thoughts also that the people that maybe aren't here are the people that really would need to hear this, I think. And this panel is, as I understand it, one of maybe 3 with only youth. And I think that also makes it extra important for people to be here. So thank you all for being here. Also, be it the stories with your fish that you're losing, we have the same stories. It's not what it used to be, and I've only heard stories from previously about how it was. And it is really hard to sit on these places as an Indigenous youth, because we know that the words that we say affect how you guys might want to work with us in the future, and how you see Indigenous youth all over the world. So it's really difficult because we feel like all of our words that we say might affect our future as a people, and that is really difficult. So thank you for being here, and thank you all for participating in this panel.
Thank you all for listening and for being here. I do agree that I think it's very important that everyone that was here today was here and was listening. And I just want to thank my mom for making my salmon shawl, for being here, and thank not only the water, but the salmon and my First Nations that brought me and led me here today.
Thank you for everyone for listening today. Thank you, Anna, for organizing, and Tildy. What I want people to take away is just think about how different this panel is to all of the other ones that you'll be listening to today and that you'll be seeing, and kind of the different perspectives that we bring. Then also, I'd like you to think about your own impact in your own environments or your own community that you have on your own water usage or the water that's in your own area. Just kind of think about how either you're helping it or you're impacting it, and just take that away. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for those final words. It's really interesting to hear what you want these people to take away, but also what you take with you from this session. So I really like the thing that Disa said in the beginning, that we never stop learning. So I hope all of you here also might have learned something. So we heard a little bit about green colonialism and decolonization, and the personal stories that you guys shared were really, really, really thoughtful. And I hope that everyone here today feel honored to have gotten to hear them. And they mean a lot. At the end, we discussed what Indigenous youth wants to say to the water sector, and as Anna said, there might be not so many here. I don't know if anyone from the water sector here? Yeah, some? That's great. So I really hope, and I really want to put a lot of weight on the fact that this perspective matters, and we need to work together to achieve change. We also want to thank this session's participant, and also take a moment to thank and acknowledge those who have come before us and made it possible for us all to gather here today. We want to thank all of those who have supported us and made this session a reality, and give an extra big thank you to David and Siwi. Thank you to Stockholm Sami Association for the pre-event where we all could gather and create connections. And also a big thank you for those who attended our youth dinner, which would not have been possible without the support from the Sami Council. now we want to give the participants thanks with some gifts.
And also, while Tilde is doing that, I also want to give a huge thank you to Tilde for moderating this panel. She's done a really, really good job, and I'm really proud of her and us all here.
So we have a few minutes left here, like 17. So if anyone has any questions, you can come down to us and we can have an open discussion about it. And after that, we will be at Stockholm Sami Association stand at level 2 and also continue these discussions. Thank you.
Silence me. Take 15.